Okay, let's dive in. When you think about global markets, you probably picture the big stuff, right? Oil, tech, maybe consumer goods.
Sure, the usual suspects.
But what about something, well, a bit more specific, like, say, bismuth potassium citrate?
Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it?
Hey, no, it sounds pretty niche, but tracking its market can actually give us some really interesting insights into much bigger industries. Think pharmaceuticals, analytical chemistry.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're taking a close look at the global market for, yes, bismuth potassium citrate.
Right. And just for context, where is this stuff mainly used?
Well, primarily, it's a key ingredient in certain meds, like for treating stomach ulcers,
Yeah.
H. pylori infections, that sort of thing. And it also pops up in various analytical testing procedures, lab work, basically.
Got it. So healthcare and science labs. Okay. Our map for this exploration is an analysis and forecast report. It's from Cognitive Market Research.
Yep, and it gives us the numbers from 2021 and then projects them out near term to 2025 and further out to 2033.
So our mission here isn't just to, read off numbers. We want to understand the story behind them. How has this market grown? What do the projections suggest?
And critically, what might these trends signal for those bigger pharma and analytical chemistry sectors around the world?
Exactly. So let's unpack this market together and see what stands out for you. Where do we start? Global picture.
Let's do that. Kicking off with the big view, the global market revenue for bismuth potassium citrate. Back in 2021, it generated just over $121 million.
Okay, $121 million dollars in 2021, a decent base. And looking ahead just a bit, say 2025.
The report forecasts a rise there to approximately $143.8 million by 2025.
All right. And the longer view, out to 2033.
Looking further out, it's projected to reach pretty close to $203 million, so $202.938 million to be precise.
Wow. Okay. So 121 million up to nearly 203 million over about 12 years. That's a clear upward path.
It definitely is.
What does that work out to, like on average per year, the growth rate?
Over that whole span, 2021 to 2033, it represents a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of 4.4%.
4.4%. Huh. For a specialized chemical like this, that sounds pretty healthy, steady.
I'd say so. It's a solid, consistent rate of expansion. Not explosive, maybe, but definitely growing reliably.
Okay, a 4.4% global CAGR. That suggests demand is definitely increasing overall, which, makes you wonder where that demand is strongest and why.
Exactly. Is it more pharma driving it?
Yeah.
Or analytical chemistry? Or maybe something else? The regional data should give us some clues.
Right, because that 4.4% is just the average. The real story's got to be in the regional breakdown. Where should we zoom in first?
Let's start with North America. See how it fits into that global picture.
All right, North America, what was the starting point there? 2021.
The market size there was around $26.1 million in 2021.
Okay, 26 million. And the projections?
The report expects it to grow to roughly 30.1 million in 2025.
Okay.
And then just under 40 million by 2033. So $39.9787 million.
Interesting. So what's the CGR for North America then?
That works out to 3.6% for the region.
3.6. Huh. That's, well, noticeably slower than the global average of 4.4 we just talked about.
It is, yeah. It suggests perhaps a more, let's say, mature market, less room for rapid expansion compared to some other areas.
And within North America, the U.S. usually dominates these things.
It does here, too. The United States accounts for the vast majority of that revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, its growth rate is actually slightly below the regional average, around 3.5% CAGR.
So the biggest piece of the North American pie, the U.S., is growing a bit slower than the region overall.
Exactly. Whereas Canada, a much smaller market in total dollars,
Right.
it shows a stronger growth rate, about 4.6% CAGR.
Oh, okay. Faster than the U.S.
Yeah. And Mexico is sort of in between the two, with a CAGR of roughly 3.8%.
So North America, significant market size, definitely, but maybe a bit more. Restrained growth, pulled down slightly by the pace in the U.S.
That seems to be the picture, yeah. A large established market that's growing steadily, but not quite matching the global pace.
Makes sense. So where are we off to next?
Let's hop across the Atlantic to Europe.
Okay, Europe. How did it compare to North America back in 2021?
Europe's total market size was a little smaller, actually, around $22.9 million in 2021.
Right, just under 23 million. And projections?
It's projected to climb to about $26.5 million in 2025, and then reach roughly $35.9 million by 2033.
Okay, so what's the regional CAGR for Europe?
Europe's comes in at close to 3.9%, 3.895% to be exact.
3.9%. Okay, so that's faster than North America's 3.6
Yeah,
and getting a bit closer to that global average of 4.4%.
exactly. It suggests a bit more dynamism there compared to North America overall. Now, the report breaks down quite a few European countries, and it shows a pretty varied picture within the continent.
Yeah, I bet. Any particular country standing out? Either really strong or maybe lagging behind?
Definitely some standouts. Germany, for instance, shows really strong momentum. Its CAGR is about 4.6%.
Oh, wow, that's above the global average.
It is. It's projected to reach roughly $7.4 million by 2033. The UK is also looking healthy, about 4.3% CAGR, going to over 4.7 million.
Okay, Germany and UK looking strong. Anyone else notable?
Spain and Sweden also show CAGRs over 4%, so solid growth there too.
And on the other side of the coin, any slower growers mentioned?
Well, Russia is noted as lagging a bit, at least among the countries they detail specifically. Its CAGR is below 3%, about 2.8%.
Okay, 2.8%. That's quite a contrast to Germany's 4.6%.
It is. So Europe overall shows moderate growth, picking up the pace compared to North America, but the energy levels really do differ quite a bit country by country.
Gotcha. So North America around 3.6, Europe around 3.9, but the report, I think.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
North America around 3.6, Europe around 3.9, but the report, I think you mentioned, flagged Asia Pacific as really dominating the growth.
Oh, yeah.
I have a feeling this is where things get really interesting.
It absolutely does. Asia Pacific. It was already the largest regional market back in 2021, significantly larger. It stood at almost $49.6 million then.
Whoa, 49.6 million. That's, yeah, way bigger than North America or Europe even back then.
Really bad.
And where is it headed?
Projected to jump to over 60 million in 2025.
Okay.
And then soar to nearly $88.7 million by 2033.
88.7 million. That is a massive increase. What kind of KGR are we talking about there?
Asia Pacific boasts a really robust AGR of nearly 5%, 4.966%.
Almost 5%. Okay, so that's clearly higher than the global average and leads all the regions we've looked at so far.
By a noticeable margin, yes. This is really where the bulk of the market's expansion seems to be happening.
So what's driving that? Is it just China being enormous? Or is it more widespread?
Well, China is the largest single market within the region, size-wise, and it has strong growth, too, about 5.1% CAGR. So yes, China's a big factor.
Okay.
But it's definitely not just China. India is showing explosive growth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, starting from a smaller base, around 6.1 million in 2021, is projected to more than double by 2033, reaching over 12.2 million. And its CAGR is leading the pack at almost 6%, 5.9 EO6%.
Whoa. Almost 6% CAGR for India.
Yep.
That's the highest country-specific growth rate we've talked about yet, right?
It is, yeah, by a good bit.
That's huge. Anyone else growing really fast there?
Singapore and the collection of countries labeled Southeast Asia also show really dynamic growth. Both of them have CAGRs over 5.3%.
Okay, so Singapore, Southeast Asia, India, China. It's pretty broad-based growth across the region then.
It really seems to be. This regional picture strongly suggests that the increasing demand for bismuth potassium citrate, likely tied to, expanding pharmaceutical production, maybe more analytical testing capacity, is particularly strong across various parts of Asia.
Fascinating. So Asia Pacific isn't just the biggest market today. It's really the engine driving that global growth number we saw earlier. Where do we look next? South America.
Let's head there. South America is another region showing pretty strong growth momentum, actually. Their market was smaller, around $8.7 million in 2021.
Okay, 8.7 million. Growing to
Nearly $10.5 million in 2025, and projected to hit just over $15 million by 2033.
Okay, 8.7 to 15 million. What's the KGR look like for South America?
That puts South America's regional CGR at about 4.65%.
4.65. So wait, that's the second highest regional growth rate we've seen after Asia Pacific?
That's right. It's outpacing both North America and Europe quite comfortably.
Interesting. So while it's smaller overall than those traditional big markets, South America seems to be really ramping up its demand. Which countries are pushing that?
Well, Brazil is currently the largest market in South America by size, but Argentina actually has the highest KGR in the region, over 5.1%.
Argentina over 5%. Wow.
Yeah, and Chile also shows strong growth momentum. Its KGR is just shy of 5% as well.
So again, specific countries really punching above their weight in terms of growth rate suggests increasing adoption or production happening there.
Exactly. That pattern of high growth in certain South American countries points to significant activity.
Okay, so South America, definitely a high-growth area to keep an eye on. What about the Middle East? How does it stack up?
The Middle East market was around $7.3 million back in 2021.
Okay, a bit smaller than South America then. Projections.
Expected to reach about $8.7 million in 2025 and projected to grow to over $12.4 million by 2033.
All right, 7.3 up to 12.4 million. What's the CAGR?
The Middle East's regional CGR is approximately 4.55%.
4.55%. Okay, so another region showing growth that's, again, comfortably above that global average.
Yep, and significantly faster than North America or Europe. It's keeping pace pretty closely with South America, actually.
Any particular standouts in the Middle East driving that 4.5%?
Yeah, the UAE has the highest CAGR in the region. Similar to Argentina in South America, it's over 5.1%.
UAE over 5% too. Interesting parallel.
It is. Saudi Arabia is the largest market by size, and it also has a healthy AGR of about 4.6%. And Turkey also shows strong growth momentum, nearly 4.9% CAGR.
Okay, so similar story. Key countries in the Middle East are really contributing significantly to this market's expansion.
It seems so. It's not just one dominant player pulling the average up. There's strong growth in several key areas.
All right, that just leaves Africa then. How does it fit into this global puzzle?
Africa's total market was about $6.4 million in 2021. So the smallest regional market we've discussed.
Okay, 6.4 million starting point and growing to...
Growing to nearly 7.9 million in 2025.
Right.
And expected to hit almost $10.9 million by 2033.
Okay, 6.4 to almost 11 million. What's the CAGR for Africa?
Africa's regional CAGR is about 4.1%. 4.126%.
4.1%. So that's moderate growth. It's sitting slightly above Europe's CAGR, right?
Exactly. So still growing faster than North America, slightly faster than Europe, but not quite at the level of Asia Pacific, South America, or the Middle East.
And within Africa, any specific countries mentioned?
South Africa is noted as the largest market size-wise, and it actually shows pretty strong growth within the region with a KGR of about 4.76%.
Oh, okay. So South Africa's pulling the regional average up a bit.
Seems like it, yeah. Nigeria is also mentioned as a notable market, with growth around 4.3% CGR.
Got it. So while maybe less dynamic overall than some of those other high-growth regions, the African market is also steadily increasing its use of this compound, particularly in places like South Africa.
That's the picture the data paints, yes.
Yeah.
Steady increase.
Okay, whew. That was a lot of numbers, a real tour around the world. Let's try and bring all these pieces together now. We've seen the global numbers and broken them down region by region, country by country, where the market is, where it seems to be headed.
And the big takeaway globally is that picture of consistent, healthy growth driven by that overall 4.4% CGRER projected right through to 2033.
But when we compare the regions, it's really clear Asia Pacific is the leader,
Yeah.
both in market size and momentum, with that CGR approaching 5%.
Yeah, no question. That's where the most significant expansion is really happening.
Then you've got South America coming in second place for growth rate, over 4.6% CAGR. Real energy there.
And the Middle East is right behind it, also showing strong growth momentum at over 4.5%. Those two regions are growing significantly faster than the older established markets.
Right. Then Africa and Europe represent more sort of moderate growth areas, both with KGRs around that 4% mark, give or take, a bit below the global average, but still solid.
Still solid, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then North America, even though it's one of the larger markets in dollar terms, has the lowest regional TGR we saw at 3.6%.
Suggesting, like you said, maybe a more mature phase of market development there.
Seems likely.
And looking at specific countries that jumped out, India's projected growth, nearly 6% CAGR, that's a major standout, really signals rapidly increasing demand.
Absolutely. And then you had Argentina and the UAE, both over 5.1%. Singapore and Southeast Asia over 5.3%.
Germany, too, strong within Europe at 4.6%.
Right. All hinting at these specific pockets of really accelerated expansion or adoption happening.
And conversely, we saw Russia's slower growth, below 3% among those detailed European countries, offering a bit of a contrast within its own region.
Provides context.
So stepping back, what does this deep dive into the granular data of a pretty specific chemical market like bismuth potassium citrate? What does it really tell you, the listener?
Well, I think it illustrates pretty clearly that the growth in the industries using this compound, primarily pharmaceuticals and analytical chemistry, isn't happening uniformly across the globe.
Well,
not at all.
Right. The differing growth rates across regions and even within regions are really telling.
It likely...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Regions and even within regions are really telling.
It likely reflect where investment is flowing, right? Where our healthcare infrastructure, pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity, advanced analytical labs, where are those expanding most rapidly?
Yeah, like a market like North America might be growing slower just because a lot of that infrastructure is already well established.
Exactly. Whereas that explosive growth you see in places like India or parts of South America and the Middle East,
Yeah.
that could signal significant new development happening in those key sectors that use bismuth potassium citrate.
So this deep dive really reveals that solid upward trend for the compound itself. But more importantly, it highlights how Asia Pacific is leading the charge with really strong momentum also coming from South America and the Middle East. It gives you this unique lens almost into shifts within the global pharma and analytical chemistry landscape.
It really does, and it kind of makes you think. It raises a broader question, doesn't it? If this relatively niche chemical compound is seeing such steady global growth, clearly propelled by demand in these specific important industries.
Then what other specialized chemicals, maybe ones we haven't even heard of, are on similar or perhaps even steeper growth curves right now? And what could the market data for those compounds tell us about where innovation, manufacturing, or healthcare are really accelerating globally?
Exactly. It might give us an even deeper, maybe earlier look into the future direction of these massive industries. Insights we might not see just by looking at the finished products of the big company reports.
Okay, let's get into it. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really specific but important bit of the pharma world, the market for bismuth potassium citrate. We're drawing on a market report from Cognitive Market Research for this one.
Yeah, it sounds niche, maybe, but it taps into some major healthcare trends. Our aim here, just for you, is to unpack what's pushing this market forward, what's holding it back, and maybe where it's heading.
Exactly. So let's start with the drivers. What's really fueling the demand here? The report flags the big one. More and more people worldwide are dealing with gastrointestinal problems. And specifically, Helicobacter pylori infections seem to be a major focus. That's the bacteria behind a lot of ulcers, right?
Precisely. And, the scary thing is antibiotic resistance.
Yeah.
H. pylori is getting tougher to treat. So doctors are leaning more on combination therapies. Bismuth potassium citrate is actually a really key component in what's called quadruple therapy. That's a heavy hitter approach they use when the standard stuff doesn't work or like when resistance is known to be high in an area.
Yeah. Makes sense. And it's not just the medical need, is it? There are economic forces, too. The report points to increased healthcare spending, especially in places like China and India, big emerging economies, which means, I guess, better diagnosis and just more people getting access to treatments for things like stomach ulcers caused by H. pylori.
Absolutely. That lines up perfectly with the broader boom in the pharmaceutical industry we're seeing, especially across the Asia-Pacific region. It's really robust. And that growth means more demand for the basic ingredients, the APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients like this bismuth compound.
Okay, so that paints a picture of growth. But it can't all be smooth sailing. What are the constraints, the hurdles? The report does mention concerns, things like adverse reactions, maybe toxicity issues.
Yeah, that's a factor. Specifically, there's a risk of neurotoxicity, but mainly at higher doses or with prolonged use. While it's generally safe when used as directed, those concerns are there, and they can limit how long someone might stay on the treatment. And then there's the whole regulatory side. Getting any drug ingredient approved is tough, right? The strict regulatory standards definitely add significant cost and complexity to making this stuff. It's not simple.
And competition, I suppose. There are other ways to treat these issues, things like proton pump inhibitors, PPIs for acid reflux, and maybe newer antibiotics. Do they cut into the market?
Oh, definitely. Those alternative therapies are widely available and used. So yeah, PPIs and some advanced antibiotics, they absolutely compete for market share against bismuth treatments. It depends on the case, the doctor's choice, local resistance patterns, lots of factors.
Right, resistance patterns. That actually brings us neatly to the trends, what's changing in this space. The report talks about a shift towards evidence-based combination therapies, particularly where resistance to common antibiotics like clarithromycin is a big problem.
Exactly. In those high resistance zones, these bismuth-containing regimens are becoming sort of the recommended strategy. It's about using what works against tougher bugs. And then there's the whole move towards personalized medicine that's impacting this too. As we get better at figuring out individual patient factors and the specific bacterial strains they have, treatment is getting more tailored. And sometimes that means using specific bismuth formulations.
Okay, and here's something I found interesting in the report, maybe a bit unexpected. Bismuth citrate compounds aren't just being looked at for prescription drugs anymore. They're exploring them for supplements and nutraceuticals, like for general digestive health.
Yeah, that's a fascinating little sidetrack, isn't it? It suggests maybe broader potential wellness applications down the line. And it ties into another trend, a growing R&D interest in metal-based drug formulations generally. Bismuth has some unique properties. One really important one is its low resistance profile. Bacteria don't seem to develop resistance to it easily, unlike so many antibiotics. That makes it pretty attractive for researchers.
So you've got this mix. Clear medical need, fighting resistance, economic growth enabling access, but also safety checks, competition, and then these newer research avenues opening up. It's quite dynamic.
It really is. And that brings up a thought for you listening. Given bismuth's unique advantages, that low resistance profile, its effectiveness where other drugs fail, how else might we see it used? Could it move beyond just treating H. pylori? Maybe into, I don't know, everyday health support? Or perhaps forming the basis for totally new drug designs against other tricky infections in the future? Something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for exploring that complex picture with us today. It shows how even a specific ingredient market reflects much bigger shifts in healthcare.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai